And my Zoom froze for a
You're
second.
recording. No, you're recording. You're good.
I'm good. Okay. So yeah, the crazy ass fucking discussions that have been going on for the last 2 weeks privately between a whole pile of us. I want to throw this open first off though, because Emily, you and I were having a discussion on Saturday, the whole crystals thing, and a whole pile of new shit came up today, this morning for me, and it was like, yeah, so I know where we're going to open the discussion. We're going to have to talk about crystals. And I've asked Ann Callahan to join us because when we're talking about crystals and some of the stuff, we definitely need her input on this. Ann made a very interesting just a passers-by comment when we were discussing earlier this morning about how she has to deprogram crystals before she makes the crystal essences. Deprogram and programming. So this is what we're going to talk about. Conversation started on Saturday on the whole crystal thing because I had been in dream time, and you know, you have those dreams, they're all over the place, etc., and then all of a sudden you come to a screeching piece of it and it becomes burned into your brain that I can still to this moment see and smell every single aspect of this piece. And in it, I'd had a group of people come to me saying, we found them, you need to come see. And I walk and I'm outside. It is a very dry, arid place, very desert-like. And they take me to a place, and in the ground, there's a place that's been dug out, and there is a pile of crystals. Crystals are very specific. They are perfectly cubed, and they're pink. And I went nuts afterwards, and I was pulling up pictures to try and find an image of something that could bring across exactly what I was seeing. And I see the crystals, and they're in various sizes. There's a good pile of them, and they're anywhere from like 2 to 3 inches to anyways 5 to 6 inches cubed. And I pick them up, and I look at a couple of them, and I'm like, yep, this is it. We found them. Fucking finally, we've got them. And I'm so excited that we found these crystals. And I take 2 of them and I put them in a pouch that I have on my belt. And everyone is just like, the energy is so high, like, oh my God, we finally got them. I have no idea, because of course that was the moment that you wake up and you go, what did we just find? What the fuck did we just find? Because you know, like in that moment, it was so important, and it was something we'd been searching for a long fucking time. And they're unlike any crystal I have seen in reality or in dream time. And they're very, very pink, very much like a cross between rhodochrosite and, as Anne pulled out an example of and showed me today, pink calcite, like optical pink calcite. The color true, and very obviously cut. Do you know what I'm saying? These were cut specifically for a purpose. And this started the conversation, because in Dreamtime, I've been working and seeing crystals in that for many years. And some of them are blue, and some of them are white, and some of them are gold. Pardon me. I've never seen anything quite like this before, at least especially to this amount of clarity. And it started the conversation. And Emily, you were saying that you've seen crystals like this before.
Yeah, so I see when I'm in visual space, I see blue ones, I see purple ones, I see pink, I see yellow, I see what. The pink are always the most interesting for me. And for me, it's interesting, like when I see them in my visual space, like I get basically a geometric grid. I close my eyes, I'll get a geometric grid, and then whatever's kind of going on is going on sort of behind that. Like the geometric grid is sort of the portal through which I am looking at that. So sort of, okay, so like it's a sigil that I'm using as like something to sort of time travel through. Usually it puts me in some sort of Egypt kind of place is usually where I end up looking, but not always. And things will sort of start to light up on the geometric grid that is overlaid on some of the stuff. And they light up sort of like, have you seen those things that they have where it's like, you can buy it and you sit your crystal on it and it lights the crystal up from underneath?
Yep.
So it'll start of sort of like lighting up like that. And what's very interesting is when I get the pink crystal that lights up, and then if I open my eyes and look at what's actually going on in the room, because I do a lot of this sort of visioning and traveling at parties when I'm dancing and stuff like that, the pink light the crystal on the grid, or the pink light on the grid, will correspond in the place in the room to where there's a live one. So there's a lot of people that are not people at the parties that I go to. Generally, I only see the pink one in correlation with someone that like is kind of a live one. So I think there's some connection to, with that kind of thing. I also have a lot of concurrent now, past life, future life, however you choose to look at it, memories and visions of myself in which I have these things on myself. I can't tell if it's something that I'm completely wearing or if it's more something that is embedded in me that sort of lights up when I do certain things. And for me, it particularly has to do with certain kind of motions or dancing or whatever that can also be like activation of certain energetics, right? Activation of certain sort of sound and light frequency, all of that kind of thing. And they sort of light up when a certain frequency is kind of reached. So there's those things. Yeah. And then I've had, conversations with Chris and Cherie about, and they sort of have concurrent now memories of placing some sort of pink sort of Merkaba kind of crystal in a certain area in the pyramid. And that, so part of why they're there, they were just in Egypt. They're not in Egypt. They're in Greece now, but they were kind of going there to see what sort of information they could kind of retrieve. But it's interesting because they were there during the time when you started having this, and they were leaving crystals everywhere. They were dropping crystals everywhere they went. And they will have, so because you brought them up this morning, I reached out and they were just available. So I had a long Skype with them this morning, and they will have some very interesting stories. I mean, you can go on their Facebook page, on Chris Geo's Facebook page, and look at all the reports from the last month while they've been there about the things that they've been doing and the things that they've seen and how their feelings about it. And Cherie's written some pieces, and they'll have a lot more to say. Like, I got a lot more information from them than they're doing on that. They'll have a lot to say when they get back. They're supposed to be coming, they were supposed to be coming home, but I think they're going to stay there. Hold on a second. My phone's ringing.
Okay, so I'm going to just add this little thing. I've had a day of synchronicities today. Sorry about that. So they'll have a lot more. They're going to stay for a few more weeks over there, but you can follow them on Facebook. They'll have a lot more to say. I'll definitely have them on the show. I told them about your remote view.
Yep. And that you saw them this morning, not even thinking about the fact that I had brought that up and whatever. So I thought that was interesting. And so when they get back, I'll hook you guys together, but I'll definitely have them on the show to sort of give their whole download of what's so crazy is some of what they were describing to me. And these two have not watched Fringe. Some of what they described to me, what they were doing, sound like a lot like putting Peter in the machine.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Interesting. Oh, yeah. I can't wait for this discussion. So synchronicity, I'm just going to go back here because Chris Geo and I are friends on Facebook. So his posts come by, etc., but we've never actually spoken or interacted. And while they've had the Egypt stuff on, because I'm in a similar time zone, when he goes live on Facebook, I'll have like the little window ping open and it'll be him talking, but it almost always happens when I'm in the middle of something. So I get to listen to like 2-3 minutes, and that's usually about it. On Monday, he had done a report. Chris Geo had done a report, like a live thing, and came up. And anyways, over the course of an hour, the first hour I was up in the morning, it must have been in my feed 3 times. So after the third time, I'm like, okay, well, obviously I'm supposed to watch this. So I watched the whole thing of him talking about what they'd gone through in the King Chamber. And I was just like, holy shit. This is like astounding stuff. Like, I really need to talk to him because there's a bunch of things that he brought up that I've also seen in past experiences, etc. So I was like, okay, well, we definitely got to do this. This morning, I'm talking to Anne, and I'm going back over our conversation we'd had on Saturday between you and I and Randy and Jeff and Ben about the pink crystals. And I went back, and there's your thing. And you had mentioned Chris and Cherie Geo.
Yeah.
About the crystals. And I was like, I didn't even see that message. Did not even see that message. It was like, okay, this is just bizarre. So there was a bunch of other synchronistic things that came into play. People who popped up in my Facebook feed, someone who I haven't spoken to since Morocco, and who I'd been really working with in early 2013, a lot of energetic work. And before we'd gone to Morocco, there was a group of us who had seen work, and we all saw it simultaneously. And it was all in the desert, and it involved crystals, it involved technology.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, because we were talking about going to Morocco, we figured it was in that area of the Sahara in Morocco, which is why we all went to the desert. As soon as we got to Morocco, we all went down to the Sahara. Shit keeps coming around. It's like 2013 shit has really, really been very, very relevant this year. So all this talk of the crystals, etc., I get another message from Brianna talking about something that she had seen in the Egyptian desert. At the same time as this friend of mine appears in my newsfeed. I didn't even know I was friends with her on Facebook. And yet here's this picture of her on Mount Everest in my newsfeed. I'm like, shit, this can't be synchronistic. And then exactly, we start talking about the other stuff. And Anne says to me, you need to go back and look at those crystals again. There's something about this, you really have to go look. And so I went and laid down, and I went to go take a look, and the very first people I saw was Chris and Cherie Geo.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, it was like, boom, both of them came out, and I was like, okay, this is not just coincidence. Obviously, we need to discuss this shit. But you said about the crystals, one of the things when I finally was able to find the crystals again and see them, I took one in my hand and I ate it.
Uh-huh.
It was just like, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. Why did I do that? What does that symbolize, type thing? So it was really, really kind of interesting. The little bit of synchronicities today have been fucking crazy, mind blowing. How all of a sudden the pieces just appear. Boom.
Yeah.
Here's a piece. Here's a piece. Here's a piece, and people are bringing them all to the table.
That conversation with them this morning was very interesting. So I'll let them kind of tell that on their own, like when they get back. But yeah, it is interesting. It kind of correlates with some of this other stuff going on. The other piece that comes through, because I talk to a lot of different people. I have a lot of different reality streams kind of going. And I also, in an email with someone else who's like, MK kind of person, she was talking a lot, and I've heard her mention this before, and I know it's a thing because I know it's part of my programming, but I haven't really talked about it with anybody. She brought up gem programming. Okay? Gem programming. And so this goes to that as well, because and it's not like when I talk about the seeing myself with this stuff embedded, there's kind of like two versions. There's one that seems very organic, and there's one that seems like maybe this was some sort of like alter kind of character or something for me, right? And so I need to get into a deeper conversation with her about the gem programming, because it's something internally I've always known existed. In fact, I had this ring that I used to wear in my very active years that I felt like was kind of associated with that and sort of bringing on that sort of personality and whatever. But all of this stuff, like the hijack and the mind control and all of that kind of stuff emanates from that same sort of place, right? So like there's something organic going on, and then the mind control is there to sort of catch that and hijack it and sort of manipulate it and whatever. And so whatever is going on with these stones is really, really important, to the point that they would actually create a full set of programs around it to sort of, So, which I find whenever I get into anything that is meaningful in any significant way, that there's the organic version, and then there's the fucking MK version, the fucking total program version.
Well,
and
over the last month, we've talked about things like the programmable crystals, sugar, and we got into salt, and that's another discussion that we've been talking, like, just between all of us. And the thing and that's what Anne, you said today. I want you to, if you could just clarify that statement earlier about how you have to deprogram crystals before you make an essence.
Okay, so when I started making essences, I didn't know how you're supposed to do it. Didn't follow any any guidance, I suppose, from anybody else. And the second essence I made, what I make essences to help deprogram people, actually, to help the kids not to pick up the programs. So what I'm asking of the crystal is that it just simply puts its pure, organic, original healing intention into the water, that it just releases that intention to the water. And you want an essence to be as pure as possible, of course. So the very second essence I made was, in fact, it wasn't it was a mineral. It was pyrite, so it's an iron ore, actually. But when I went to read the essence, you read an essence by, you just hold it and feel it and see what comes to mind. And when I held the essence afterwards, there was some very, very nasty stuff came out of it. Fear-inducing, really, really horrible stuff. And I thought, oh my God, this stone is carrying some really, really nasty programming. And then I realized that what I had to do was go right back. I had to roll the stone right back to its very original geometric, its very original pattern, its very original geometric pattern, and then roll it forwards in time to make the essence. And after that, then I realized that an awful lot of the stones that we come across that are, you know, that you would buy, like look at the size of that one, for instance. Something like that has very likely been programmed already. And yeah, they will hold the program. I mean, they don't have an intention themselves. They're just really good at holding programs, and they're really good at transmitting programs into your electrical field as well. So, you know, if you have an essence, or if you have a crystal near you, it's very easy for you to pick up a program that crystal could be sending out. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. It's just if it's a crystal that's in a rock shop or somewhere that humans have easy access to, it's probably been used already, and it's probably got a program.
Well, it's funny because we found when we were in Morocco, we had, of course, the huge gathering. There was like 75 people from like a shit ton of countries that came there for the big QEG build. And of course, you have all kinds of people who came, and we had some really strange people show up while we were in Morocco. Really, really strange people show up. Several agencies, the whole bit. And we would find crystals around the house. And you'd do that whole thing where you'd find one in the garden or on the garden wall, and you'd be like, okay, who's lost their crystal this time? Because it was granted, there was always crystals. Everyone would put them down. You'd forget. And you'd do that whole thing where you go around and you'd be like, okay, who lost this crystal? And at one point we found a massive crystal. It was a quartz crystal. It was about as big around as the one you just showed, Anne, but about, a good 6 inches tall. And it was a really heavy one. And it was very clean. Was very clean. Like it wasn't rough. It was obviously been all professionally done. It was an expensive, if you want to look at it that way, crystal. And I picked it up and I just went, ew. I don't know whose this is, but whoever's I find out this is, I think we're gonna have to tell them to leave the house. Like if they're here. And we took that around. Now again, very big crystal. You would think that somebody would say, oh my God, that's mine, because it was an expensive crystal. No one would own it. No one would own it. And we literally took it. And when we moved to the new place, I couldn't leave it there because we just put it and buried it put it out in the garden. I took it and we took it and we took it to the beach and we buried it in the sand. And I buried it in the sand and left it there for a month. So it was like, I have to clean this crystal. I don't have the time to go in and like looking at it, but I just put it in the sand on the shore. And that was my whole thing, like the salt, the sea, the sand, let that just clean it. And we took it out and it was fine. After that, I took it out and it was fresh. It didn't feel, because it felt really negative when we first picked it up, and no one wanted it. Like, that was the other thing. No one wanted this crystal.
Yeah. And there's another sort of programming though, Danny, that, and I do believe is a terrible word, but yeah, I do believe that we stored information, and information that we would need in our future timeline or something like that, you know, some other time.
That's what Chris and Cherie say that they're doing. They say like that they're there to retrieve information that they left for themselves in another now or in the past or in the future, whatever's going on. You know what I mean? And so they, you know, they're trying to retrieve that. And I also had this conversation with them that they thought this was interesting before they left, that, you know, time isn't linear. It isn't what we think. And if time loops, then it's entirely possible that even though we see the pyramids here now, they actually haven't been built yet. It's just loopbacks. So we see them as sort of a beacon to get to, and that it's impossible that they're actually going there to set that intention now. They think they're going there to retrieve, but they may have been going there to set the intention now. So to sort of be working both sides of that. So yes, that's interesting you said that, and because that's what they have, that vision that they're going there to retrieve something off of these stones, and they left a bunch of stones for that same reason, because if this is them actually dropping it off now, they wanted to be doing that. So
well, it's so funny because, like I said, in 2013 it was a really energetically busy time for me and this group that I was working with. Like, we were continuously going out. We found fucking crystals in the Himalayas. We found the big one that was under CERN. We found a massive one under Malta, like massive crystals that were like the size of a room. And we were dealing with reprogramming them and dissolving some of the programs that were already set into them and resetting them. And you think at the moment back then, you think that you're doing it in linear time. Your assumption is, okay, we did it. It's done. That's great. That's awesome. And then you watch as things play out. And yet then all of a sudden in 2015, we had certain things play out. And I was just like, oh, wait a second. And then in 2017, we had a whole shitload of stuff in the end of 2017 play out that I was like, oh my God, we did all this work, but we weren't working in time. We were working outside of time. The shit that we did then we're now starting to see the pieces that were done. And I think some of the stuff is obviously it's not even happened yet. But that work is outside of time because, like you said, if you're in a time loop, if we're
now but not yet.
Now but not yet.
It's not happening yet. Yeah. Right. So back then you were doing it now. It was the now you were doing it that you were right, but it hasn't happened yet. So it was now but not yet.
Yeah. And we're back to the fucking time loops. Fucking shitty. Okay, Ben, you got to add your thing because Ben's he's doing his dance there. He's gonna lose his mind in a moment.
Well, we're talking about programming, right? So after doing some work with some of these people that we've been doing work with, when they first started building their devices and putting their bits together, things weren't quite going according to plan, and they couldn't work out why. Now, one of the what do we call it? One of the substances that they use is a certain type of steel. The way that this certain type of steel, it's a stainless steel, right? So I'm not going to try and be too secretive, but the way that this specific stainless steel is made is under pressure and heat. E.g., like when they make the pipes and stuff like that, they press the pipes. They don't like make a sheet, then roll it and weld it. They press them. And what these guys started finding is that due to like them pressing, so if you've got a pipe that's going through a system under heat, this end here that comes out first is going to cool first, and this end is going to be hot first. And what they found is that created magnetic polarities. The one that cooled the first would be negatively charged, like a south pole, and the hottest end would be positively charged, like a north pole. And they were like, oh shit, so we've got it, because of that, because they're working with magnetic and electrical fields, they have to work with this. But then what they found is they could tune it out. So with your crystals, see, this is where I get it's kind of like, depending on how we take energy and stuff like that, it's like you can charge, let's say, and this is just a potential, okay, but you can charge a crystal positively with positive energy, let's say, and leave it in the sun, and that has a potential to flip that energy's poles. So it will depend on where the energy comes out and is received. So when we start talking about tuning and all that sort of stuff and crystals, it's like I sent in our chat, I chucked a YouTube which was explaining this theory that we've been working on, based on the pyramids being chemically created polymers with specific crystal content, with specific metal content, which it creates them, it allows them to be conductive. This is actually something we're working on right now, is this conductive insulation for housing to store energy in, which is completely natural. It doesn't overheat, yada, yada, yada. But then you've got the potential, if they're pouring polymers and they're using the same kind of stuff that we're using, and we're using what we're using because they used what they used, quite literally, it's not like the lime Roman-based stuff. It's a different type of Sorel cement, which is a chemical reaction, and it creates heat naturally within itself. So these blocks then become magnetic. And you've got north and south poles, which then if you stack them, you know what magnets do when you do that. You know, you've got a lock. But all these things are programmable, all of them. And I remember when I was really young, like I was like 12, 13, and I was a little bit of a sick boy, and I started studying mass murderers and stuff like that. But then it got me into supernatural. And I remember watching these dudes go around, and they were geomancers and stuff like that, and they would go around and they would literally, on haunted houses and haunted property sites, they would find seams of quartz crystal that had stored trauma and would replay it over and over and over again under certain circumstances. So, you know, this is yeah. It's like, it's well bang within it. I mean, right down to in our soils, we use certain ground up stones for their paramagnetic content, literally. And yeah, it's very interesting, because even with calcite, ground calcite used in a polymer, like it does different things. So, and they hold different charges and they hold different frequencies, which then also means you can tune, right? So I'm bringing this stuff in, Jeff, because of all the DeSantes and da-da-da-da-da. But as I say, like, we're talking about guys that build devices that they will give to other people to do great things. And these other people will try and reverse engineer them, and the machines stop working. They can't make them work. They cannot make them work, because it is all down to tuning. It's not even down to the fucking device. Like, these guys have been working with this tech so long. I swear that a couple of them, with what they can do with their devices, can literally actually just go and put their fucking finger in the water and do what these devices do. And they've got to build the devices to actually show people what they can do.
Yep.
So
almost placebo effect.
Yeah. So I think I'm onto this, and I didn't even know it. Emily, you'll know. Orgonite that I make is powderized quartz in the fiberglass resin, and I'm actually waiting, anticipating 5G to roll out, so that I could see if this scalar wise consumes that 5G signal.
Just on that, Jeff, that guy that we've been talking about, the geometry dude, what you should look at is getting some copper wire and trying to, you know, bend some of his sigils and set them specifically for 5G in your orgonite. And then add that, do your ones now, and then do one with a sigil and put that in place and see if you notice a difference, because boom.
Which biogeometry guy have you been talking about?
What's his name?
I have to go back and find these links. But Emily, the
guy who's the doctor?
Yeah. He's the guy that's living in Canada now, they've done all these tests throughout Eastern Europe, and
he's fascinating. He's fascinating. I haven't listened to anything recently, but a couple of years ago, I was really into what he was talking about. And he was, I think, one of the first guys where I heard about the fact that, like, in Egypt, they had a different doctor for each eye because each eye was coordinated to different organs in the body. So you didn't just go, there was an eye doctor for your right eye and an eye doctor for your left eye. He has some fascinating information. Like, his stuff is super interesting.
Yeah, Fred, Brianna has just put a link in there, the biogeometryshop.com, biosignatures. And I still can't remember his name.
Basically, with what Jeff's getting at with the stuff that he's making, is this is what we've been studying with levity, is the aspects of actually creating energetic Faraday cages based on this stuff, and that's what I actually believe things like the pyramid setups are about. They are literally tuning in naturally, not fucking making all this unnatural stuff and changing it from its natural structure. They're literally mimicking nature. I mean, Heliopolis, when they built it, it was built over 600 years to the Fibonacci sequence. It's the human body from the feet to just below the crown. And each room explains every single piece of it. And that's how advanced they were. So they used to build structures to nature's sequence. They didn't just build structures. So then what they're doing is they're interplaying. So, you know, it's kind of like frequency. And this comes back to music and all that kind of stuff as well, Em, is like you bounce music off of a flat wall, and it actually shatters sound and deflects it in different ways, which creates different things. You put it into an amphitheater with natural curves and stuff, and it does something completely different.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of parties in a lot of different kinds of rooms and you know, with different kinds of DJs, and some DJs seem to be completely ignorant to the geometry of the room, and they're just playing what they're going to play, and they always do the same thing. My favorite DJs are the DJs that understand the structure of the room and will literally use the room as part of their setup. Like, they'll literally be bouncing sounds so that they're moving around. My favorite DJ for this is a guy named Eddie Richards, Evil Eddie Richards, and he's credited with creating the genre that is called tech house, which for me is the best music to kind of do this stuff to. But I've been to a lot of parties that were in rooms that have there's no corners, that all the edges are rounded. And then I've been in other rooms, that have particular kinds of shapes or geometric sort of like layout that it completely changes the experience of the music. Like, I could hear the same set in a square room, and then I could hear one that has rounded edges, and the experience when you're in the room that has no corners, all rounded edges, you feel like you're inside the music. It's like the music is enveloping you as opposed to listening to the music.
That's almost like the analog and digital thing again, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on that, Randy and I, while we were talking about analog, he summarized it's a simulation over current, right? So it's going to be over a wire or whatnot, but it has the natural organic chaos of our life network in that signal. Digital is over current, but it removes that life network chaos. It's only ones and zeros.
Yep. So
Ben, what you were talking about, this organic signal is over our superposition of atoms in our molecular mortal world. So there's 3 different types of signal transmissions that we're kind of dialing into the definitions of. Analog, digital, that's over wire, but there's this organic life network superstructure, mycelium thing that can be replicated via these pyramids or other quote tech.
Well, and it's for me, I'm very visual, and when I see analog is a current. It is Tracy, during our last discussion, pulled up the definition of analog, and that it flows. It is a solid, and it's like if you look at it,
Constant.
and it's constant. It continues. It continues, and it's the difference for me of looking at. Here is the solid line, and it just flows. Like whether it's a Fibonacci, whether it's a Mobius strip figure eight, it is a continuous flow. The digital is it looking at the same image, but it's made out of dots. It's made out of.
It's pixelated.
It's pixelated. It's like stop, start, stop, start, start. It doesn't flow. It is a continuous on and off, a stop and a start. I see Randy's here.
I was going to say, speaking of not flowing and on and off, Randy Goggins.
Not flowing and on and off. Look, we found Randy.
Hello.
Randy, thank you for joining us this evening. What is your internet going to hold? This is our big question.
Oh, I'm at home now. I was in traffic. No, we're good. We're good.
So we just started riffing about analog, digital, and the organic connection system, which Emily and I had a conversation this morning about what are you tethering to? So I don't even know how to start that one.
We had the lingo down at the end of our conversation, but now it's so it was kind of like, okay, how to explain it? Shit. It was so easy when I was running. So I talked to Jeff while I'm running 10 miles. I talked to Jeff, and I can think the most clearly, and it just flows, and I have all the good one-liners and the zingers, and then trying to create that. So like some of this goes into some of the conversation I was having with Chris and Cherie, and so I'm going to leave some of that for them. But we were basically talking about like us being sort of like how you tether, like how you deal with this information, like how you tether yourself to your reality and to whatever you're dealing with. And we got into how Andrew DeSantis sort of uses the blockchain. Like for him, like that's how he sees the tether. For me, I see it like when I'm having this visual stuff while I'm dancing going on, there's always a tether that I know is me that has this sort of disc spinning around on it that's moving in and out of all this geometry and showing me how the pyramids are. It's kind of like, it's like I see it as me. The disc is me, but the tether is sort of like my life force, and it is grounded here and also attached to my highest self that exists outside of time, right? And so what Andrew was talking about when the way he sees, what was it with these strange loops? The strange loops are kind of like how he's going out and doing this exploration of this digital space, but staying tethered to his own organic self and the reality that he's trying to generate. The reason he's able to correlate this to life experience and not get sucked into the vortex, so it's his co-host, that is sort of monetized the whole situation. How was that, Jeff?
Perfect. Yes. Yeah. So that if you're tethering to another zinger he had is if you're, what was it, Ben? If you're stuck on a narrative, you go down with the ship.
Yes. Oh, that was one of those moments when he. So guys, just to bring you up to speed, we're talking about Andrew DeSantis, and you guys know that we've talked about him on and off for like, I don't know, months now. He was just did a live interview on Sunday. I will make sure I put the link in here so you understand. He made a comment about the he didn't use the word narrative. He didn't use the word narrative. That was my word. But basically what he said was, if in a broad terminology, was the fact of people are bringing all these, their blinkers, their ideas, their theories, and I said narratives to the table. And that those that are tied to the narratives will go down with the ship. They will sink with the ship. But with the ship, when the narrative falls apart, they're left with nothing. And that those who are observing and kind of keeping a broad spectrum view on things, when things go down, they don't go down with the ship because it's more of a broad spectrum. I literally that was a thud moment for me when he said that. I was like, oh yeah, he's right on it again.
Jeff and I were sort of talking about that as well, in that like what this sort of tether or whatever does, right? Like it allows you to sort of explore these narratives without getting invested in them, right? Like you can,
Yes.
and if the narrative, and Jeff and I were talking about our little chat group on Facebook as an example of this, that people go there and we drop information, it's there, we all look at it at some point, some of us comment back, some don't, no one gets their panties in a bunch if somebody doesn't, comment on their thing or whatever, some of us get to what we do, but like it's constantly going on, and none of us are like sitting around waiting to hear what the other person says about it. If the narratives, if the story is good, if the narrative or the story is a good story, then you can go off and do your own thing and come back to it and the information is still valid. If the narrative requires everybody to be constantly engaged in it, constantly petting it and constantly feeding it and whatever, that's when you have a bullshit narrative that's going to go down as soon as somebody jumps off the ship.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and I like his hey man, I love you guys all, but really this adventure is really about me, and I'm liking his take on, hey man, your reality is a single player game when it comes down to it, if you're going to move forward in time. So it's just interesting that his hour and a half or whatever it was multidimensional yet again, and I will do the notes on it.
And we'll all wait for Jeff to release his PDF notes. I was scribbling myself. I was listening to it really late at night. So by the time I got to that last 15 minutes of the interview, which to me was where everything was just like, he really packed it into the last 15 minutes. It was kind of like he's going to go to say what he wants to say by the end of this interview, regardless of what Vortex wanted. I was exhausted, and I'm like trying to take notes. I was like typing in time stamps to people and going, at this point he says this, and then I had to give up. So, no, I'll have to listen to it again, in the morning when I'm caffeinated.
Yeah, and Catherine Austin Fitz brought another little take this last week. She said, I see a new reality being created, but there are many instrument gauges that are reading incorrectly. So if you're following those instrument gauges, you're in a fake or overlay reality, and you better check yourself. Check your tether.
Well, Ann and I have been talking, and Brianna and Gail, and we've been nonstop for the last week. The narrative war that's going on right now. Like, at the moment, there is literally a bombardment of narratives, and it's like, I mean, there always is, but this last week or two, it seems like it's just ramped up to, like, everyone seems to have felt we must stake our claim. This is our narrative. We say it's truth, and you have to follow this. And it's almost like a one-upmanship. Like, everyone's got to get their narrative in there, and you can watch. And it's interesting because maybe they have pieces, like you'll have someone who'll put some piece of information out. You go, okay, that's kind of interesting. And someone else puts a piece of information out. But it's like you said, Emily, you can put it on the table and you can look at it and you can walk away. And when you come back, it's still interesting. It hasn't just disintegrated. But it seems like extremism right now. I don't know what you guys like. We've gone to a level of extremism, and
there's a bunch of new religions popping up. That's what it's like. Yeah, it's a bunch of bunch of radical extremist kind of religions popping up, and people being, people. It's almost like, and Randy and I have talked about this. People sort of breaking out of one box and going immediately into the other. It's the Russian nesting dolls, and like they think like they create a box that's just a teeny bit bigger for themselves than the one they just came out of, but that the locks are even tighter on. You know what I mean? So it's just like like a lot of people are breaking a certain kind of programming, a certain kind of religious programming, or a certain kind of informational or societal programming, and then like going into something that is actually like kind of crazier than the one they came from. You know what I mean? So it's just like patriotism, and with all this QAnon nonsense going on and whatever, like literally the amount of like patriot pounding that's going on is just like the guy. There's like, to me, that's the, like, there's no bigger mind control program than patriotism. I think it's worse than religion. Right? You can get people to do the stupidest shit in the fucking name of patriotism. And that's how, like, when you see people fighting over whether they believe QAnon or not, you see them calling themselves, well, if you're really a patriot, if you're not a patriot, if you're just like, Jesus, this is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. You know what I mean? And it's you know, and then they bring in the Christianity stuff to it with it as well. But like the narrative, these box, whatever's happening, like if they're really gaining information, if they really think they're learning something from Q, then why are they in this like box that they're very rigid about? You know, like what? Whenever there's rigidity to information, like, you know, I'm suspicious at this point. Whenever you have to believe something, to, you know what I mean? You have to believe this. No, I don't.
Well, you know what? Stephanie just made a comment I want to put in here because this is where my head has been for the last 4 days. Stephanie said, it makes me wonder if that's what's happening to all the tech. There's so many more people who are not buying into the narrative. And I don't know. It feels like that's kind of like what's happening. It's like as people are kind of like letting go of this narrative stuff, it's like the technology around you is failing at about the same rate.
So, just on tech failing, because we're talking about... Because we're talking about like analog and digital and natural and da-da-da, I'll tell you about a couple of experiences, and one of them happened yesterday, which was unfortunate. I couldn't go into it because it could have meant me dying or killing someone, but it was quite interesting. So I've done a lot of acid in my time, and in my when I started when I got really into acid, I started reading a lot of Aldous Huxley and all this sort of stuff, and locking myself in the bathroom and literally like feeling what was going on. But when I used to stare at trees, this thing used to happen, and it gave me this really cool idea of, because I'm a hospitalitarian, I have been for quite some time. Working in hospitality, running bars and shit like that. And what I found quite funny was we used to call people that we used to catch jogging as we were leaving the bar day walkers. But anyway, these trees, they used to pulse through the prime colors. Mm-hmm. There was no interruption, nothing like that. It was just this pulse. So it would just go through the colors and it would just happen. And I was like, hey, that's how we would fucking, balance out day and night, is just having the colors pulse through and people would activate according to their colors. I was like, this is kind of cool. So come forward about 10 years and I started reading, and Brandy, please don't judge me, I started reading the Emerald Tablets. Until I actually met a really smart person. He went, you realize that's a fucking contract, you idiot. Go out and, make your peace with it and burn the fuck out of that book. So once I burnt the book, it was quite funny because I had this, I don't know what we call it, a lucid dream where literally Thoth came and dragged me out of my bed and took me to Egypt, and we went down through the pyramids underneath it. And as we're standing there, we were standing in this gigantic, and the only way I could describe it is it was a lake, and it felt like a lake, but it wasn't a lake. It was just the prime colors. And I looked up, and at the base of the pyramid was literally the fleur-de-lis doing the same thing, just pulsing out these colors. And I looked at Thoth, and he just went, and as I looked out, here were all these bodies. And, the only thing I've got to correlate it to is the Hall of Amentes. And here were all these bodies, and not just Egyptian bodies, like Nordic, Greek, the whole lot. And they were just all in stasis. Mm-hmm. And I was like, holy fuck.
Yep.
So there's that's my kind of experience of natural, is pulse. And not pulse pause. There was no pause. It just was fluid.
Yep.
But then yesterday, while driving home, and this is why I say I couldn't actually go into what started happening, but as I was driving, but bearing in mind that I'm working on about 4 hours sleep over the last 3 or 4 days, but as I was driving, when your TV drops out and it does that, I think they call it snow.
Yeah.
It just goes. Psh, the road started doing that.
That's an analog effect, actually.
Yeah. Well, this is exactly. So this is what I'm saying. The difference, right? So the road started doing this fucking snow thing, and I was like, okay, I'll see how long I can keep this up. I'll wait for a straight bit of road. And there wasn't a straight bit of road. So as I'm coming down the hill, I just started going into this vision, and literally the whole road just turned into fucking white snow, and these little pixel boxes started going bloop, bloop, bloop. And I was like, oh, I really want to fucking go into this, but I'm driving.
But I'm driving a car down a mountain. Perhaps I shouldn't.
At 80 k's an hour. But this thing started happening. That's the first time that's happened, because I have this other vision that I call it fairies, and the only thing I could kind of describe it, and I know this is a very, very bold claim, but I think I see plonks literally vibrating if I stare. Plonks.
What are plonks?
The smallest, as in like the smallest measurement that they've got, like a plonk, PLA. Well, okay, well, okay, cool.
Just for his accent, it's okay.
Oh,
a plank measurement.
Yeah, plank measurement. Because I used to call them fairies, and that they just, if I stare long enough, all that happens is everything goes into this, I don't know, thing. It's like a gel, but everything's still there, and I just see these things going in and out of everything. It's really fucking cool.
Yep.
But this is the first time I've had this white snow thing, and we're talking about tech failing and all this stuff about, you know, them using frequency to create lenses in the mess that's up in the atmosphere and stuff. And I was like, fuck, this is really fucking interesting, with the sun and all this other shit going on. So that was that rant is basically my version of what organic is just, it kind of just is, but it's the ratio of all, and it just goes through that ratio and there's your loop. And this analog thing / digital is kind of like DC versus AC. You've got DC, which is that current, and it just keeps going. And you've got AC, which is pulse pause, essentially.
The way this whole conversation kind of evolved over chat with us had to do with going back to Cliff High's statement that universe pulsates in and out at 22 trillion times a second. And tacking on to that, Emily and I talked about this in a podcast, and I began to develop this concept of what he was talking about based on a sinusoidal wave, a sine wave. If you have an oscilloscope and you look at it, on an oscilloscope, there's always a constant, and it's called a carrier signal. It's the same principle that works with the conduction of FM radio. There's always a subcarrier signal that's a constant that supports the voltage fluctuations between peaks and valleys on the oscilloscope. So bearing that in mind is the analog. That is the analogous. Analog is analogous to something. Analog doesn't exist by itself.
Yep.
So when we talk about natural versus analog, you're correct, because it is a replication. Digital simply takes it to the next level, compacts it into bits, ones and zeros, in compression, and allows it to be conveyed to an endpoint, which winds up being, ta-da, analog again. Okay, so the only natural conduction of sound would be what occurs within nature itself, via nature, exactly what Ben was saying all along. Is it the guitar? Is it the harmonics on the strings? Is it the didgeridoo? Is it the sound of, yesterday we had a tornado here, and I took my little Zoom H2 handy quarter outside, and I held it up, and I just recorded some of the natural ambience that was going on in the air as a storm was coming through, because the birds were going insane. And it was so interesting to listen to that sound in compression, because when you're in a storm condition, you have compression of air coming down and compressing, and there's a natural, you know what I'm talking about, Ben? It's almost like you're in a vacuum, and yet at the same time, everything's wide open. It's like the most fantastic sound field in the world. So the difference between analog and digital is simply at end point, it always comes back to analog, okay? the constant in all of this, when we're talking about time and space, and I looked at Cliff's theory, and it's interesting, it's novel. It's not meaningful to us because 22 trillion isn't meaningful to us. All big numbers are abstractions. So it could pulse in, it doesn't matter.
No.
Even if we're assuming that there's a pulsation, which I won't argue with, there's also a constant. What is the constant? And this goes back to the technology and the memes and the internet info wars and all of the bullshit that floats around all the time, some of which has some integrity and some of which does not. The only constant in all of this
The information flow.
No, it's actually the individuated consciousness of the individual at all times. We are not only the observers, we are the direct influencers and creators of the time field itself in which this exists. And this is kind of something I've worked out for a very long time. So
wasn't that sort of the whole thing with like in Fringe? Like the observers were them in the future if they let themselves get out of control. Like they'd basically come back to observe themselves from the future, right? And like that was the whole.
Well, and the lesson there was that things really started to go badly the more they started to influence. When they were simply observers, they're the watchers, the metaphor of the watchers, the fallen angels, all of that. Things really went off the rails, and in the end what you find out is that the whole plot line was all along they were reverse engineering the past, the future, the parallel worlds. But exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to the whole thing what we're talking about with the crystals of like, you know, like the past, the future, the now, but not the now, the now that was then or then.
The now but not yet, or the now but already happened.
Yeah.
But remind me that the end result of Fringe, wasn't that a strange loop in that they
resolved it.
Arrived right back to where they started from.
Yeah. Like it was a reality that had been created because they had become sort of obsessed with using technology to sort of try and, you know, like they'd become obsessed with using technology to the point that they actually put it in their bodies, which is where we're at, right?
Yep.
And they had used that to sort of map out the future before it happened so they could get to each event before it occurred and sort of arrange it to occur the way they wanted it to occur, which didn't necessarily always happen because there was always somebody's consciousness interfering, but it was them trying to control it that was creating all of these rifts and problems.
So this kind of goes into what DeSantis is really talking about when he's talking about the metaphor of the blockchain, because he's talking about the fact that he doesn't even care what Bitcoin's worth right now. The value of it was in the attention being paid to the thing, and that the thing changed as a result of being observed constantly. In other words, human consciousness interacting in a digital space was creating the phenomena called Bitcoin, while everybody thinks, oh, this is money. No, this is a focus point of human intention and consciousness into a single point.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was fucking talking about powering shit off of blockchain.
Yes.
If I'm not wrong, once again, is exactly what Dollard has been stating they discovered from tweaking Tesla's stuff, from sending information from radio station to radio station. The energy, the information created the energy.
Right.
And that's what, like, all I fucking heard from him was Tesla, 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 he's done it. And then when you put that, because I'm not on Twitter, I don't even know what that fucking shit is, but I'll get there. But essentially, when I looked at that bloody hard drive sitting on what I can only imagine is a frequency board.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's not just building a fucking computer, he's fucking tuning it. And then it's like, what is he tuning it to? Like, has he downloaded the analog fucking blockchain? Like, you know what I mean? Has he recorded the white noise from blockchain? And
well, that's what his Dios is. If you go and look at his Dios, right? That's what that sort of is that sort of like he's, you know what I'm talking about? If you go to his website, that whole thing is like, it's like whatever you...
Geometry.
Whatever you place your intention on that, whatever you click on, it creates like a whole reality sort of around that. That if you place your attention over here, it creates another reality around that.
Well, it takes the geometry that he's created
Yeah.
and puts it into analog blocks.
Yeah.
Okay,
for
so
displacement.
yes. So this is why when he tweets, follow these guys, and there's like 20 of them, those guys are creating a tweet storm, the white noise, to carry the signal.
It's the carrier signal, yeah.
Yeah. So it is unbelievable what these kids are up to.
So these dudes are already building the fucking UNet. This is what they're doing.
Right.
They are blocking out like NSA, CIA with white noise, and that white noise is the blockchain. So I'm wondering what they are, because all he's talking about is hijacking code in there, right?
Well, he's using technology. So the thing about it is
loading info, which is creating more power.
Yeah, and he's also announcing, without ever saying it, that technology itself is a failure. That the real point isn't the technology. The technology is the means to focus consciousness
yeah,
to move off of the technology.
Yes.
See, I actually think he's smart enough to know that.
That's the game theory.
Was he not literally though saying is like, you guys aren't getting,
They're not getting it.
you're not getting it, and you not getting it is why it's not working.
Yeah.
Well, there's a time dilation to not getting it.
Well, that's it. But that's what he was saying, is he's like, depending on how you're looking at time, because, and he said to Vortex, he's like, Bitcoin has changed you. Bitcoin has manipulated you. It is da-da-da-da-da. Look at where you are from where you were now.
Yeah. Vortex did not get that.
He doesn't get that. The other thing Jeff and I were talking about this morning is that this whole thing, and if you think about this is fucking genius, right? This is a way to separate, like, we're going through this time where things are being revealed and people are figuring shit out and they can't necessarily hide shit anymore. But all they can really do is present information in a way that, like, most people will be distracted by it. So they create this fucking Bitcoin, this fucking cryptocurrency thing, and what's lying beneath it is a way to understand the reality that we're in right now, a way to understand how our reality was put together and how it functioned. The distraction is to tie it somehow to money or whatever. So the people who are focusing on making money here are missing the entire point. So Andrew DeSantis is sitting there and basically explaining to people how reality works, how you can generate time, reality, energy based on what you focus your consciousness on and what you try and do with it. And they're all like, but what is it worth? $868,000?
What's Bitcoin worth?
Right.
I want to know where it's going to be.
That's the whole thing.
Well, remember that he read that paper, right?
Yeah.
At the end. And that fucking pissed myself laughing, because no one even, like, it was just like, okay, and before we've got to go, da 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 da. Yeah. That was 2002, that paper. And I didn't realize, I think it was them that was talking, it was DeSantis. When did he state that emails started?
Yeah, remember.
Email started back in the
2001. Well, what they were talking about was when email became the big thing, like when Gmail was like, 2001. So the very next year, someone's like, all right, so now we've got this. How about this kind of economy thing? Right?
So when in his text yesterday, he said he didn't actually say Bitcoin or blockchain, but it's a currency to anchor time in the blockchain. So if you have an anchor, that's a metaphor of the blockchain. That's a metaphor for what we're doing in consciousness. Where are you anchoring your tether? Is it in an overlay narrative, an instrument that's telling you an official reality? Are you following Cobra or blah blah blah? Or are you are you anchored yourself?
Yeah.
If you're stuck in the narrative,
Well, you
Right.
can take it a whole bunch deeper, because when he starts talking about what he's utilizing blockchain for, like houses, titles, like he's not just talking about blockchain. He is, but he's sitting there and he's stating that the basis of blockchain is perfect. He's saying all the forks and derivatives are fucking it, but that perfectness is making him put enough trust that he's coding his titles into the blockchain, which then gives it a time signature that cannot be altered.
Now imagine what happens. Imagine what happens when you anchor something substantial like real estate with a time into a blockchain. And what do you do then about proprietary ownership of said properties? See, he's essentially now screwing with the entire
property titles and all that kind of
shit.
Yeah.
See, the genius of all this is it's not about money. They're finding ways to do the end run around the very thing. This is not about money in the digital domain. That was done in the 80s. Money was digitized in the 80s.
Is he basically, well, it sounds like, from what you've just said then, is if we were to, able to load these things, these fictitious things, to create information on a chain, right? So all these titles, all these fabricated titles, all this bullshit, onto a chain, you would have what? Essentially unlimited energy based on that information, right? So then you take away all their substance in the fiat and everything and load it all into the chain. Use it to
create energy,
And that
it's like reversing the vampirism.
That is the frequency, the blockchain.
Based on what we know about the real
it's taking it out of their control. It's taking it out of their time.
So in the real estate crash that we had in 2008, 2009 here in the United States, as banks began to fail and the real estate market began to fail, the other thing that began to fail was the law, because people went into court and began to challenge the titles that were inured through mortgage companies and the whole process that was basically creating these contracts. Flash forward now, we now have a legal mechanism which is a real-time, constantly updated contract system that's constantly holding chain of custody evidence that is completely open source. There's no fuckery in this. You can't fuck with it.
Everyone holds. That everyone who's a part of holds. That every party holds.
Public,
right?
that,
and someone's just stated in the chat, birth certificate blockchain. No, you wouldn't need it.
No.
You wouldn't need it.
Oh, he froze. Oh, okay.
There we go.
This is the whole thing. It makes it null and void because the birth certificate is only attached to all those other things. See, this is that whole the one thing that like the UCC stuff kind of brought out from the OPPT all the way through to what's going on now with fucking names that won't be mentioned here. Is essentially is like, when OPPT came out and they started talking about the UCC filings, what they stated was you got to get all your mortgages and all your birth certificates and all your bank fucking, and you've got to put it on the file. And it's like, well, hold on. If everyone's saying that everything stems from the birth certificate, the only thing that you should ever have to do is with that document, because everything stems from that. Everything. Your passports, your entire public ID. So it's not needed.
Well, UCC was a formalization of the straw man to create the mechanism to basically hijack value from the living soul.
Yeah.
Now the living soul was written, the living soul has now invested itself into a blockchain with a legal trail of evidence, chain of custody, that is open sourced, totally visible, constantly updated in a ledger that's replicated
a billion
thousands of
times.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
whose exactly? So then, whose energy is exponential and
Yeah.
essentially endless? Because as he stated, and I can't remember, I think it was like number 59, was the loop. Like when they get to 21 million.
Oh,
Oh.
the mining never stops. It just keeps authenticating transactions, but it doesn't mint new coins. It's a never-ending loop.
Which means it is 0 point energy.
Right. It just completely, yeah.
Hmm.
It
Okay,
is.
so-
It is. This is like the biggest piece to the entropy reduction simulator.
Exactly right.
But there is a caution out there, and it's not in my reality. I'm not creating it, but I posted in our chat the digital currency group. Every company that the digital currency group owns is the baddies, and they are going to harvest those that are confused, any value that they put into those companies' blockchains, because they're not open source, they're not decentralized, and they're not open ledger. So
Where did you put that list? I was that in the chat with us?
It's in the chat. You have to click
Okay,
on it. Yeah.
I'll have to see if I can pull that up.
So, I mean, Steemit, EOS, Ripple. I mean, there's a lot of Civic is identity, your identity. They want to put that on a blockchain.
Monetize your identity. Yeah.
Yep, but that's
But that, see, once again, you're still only, like, all they're now doing is, like, depending on how we're looking at it, is you have analog, which is the well, for lack of better terminology, is maritime. This maritime bullshit. So now all that, like, this is what we were sort of talking about, D, a while ago, where it looks like, for me anyway, they've gotten so, the powers that be have gotten so unimaginative that there is literal cycles, and we're going through the computer age again, where someone created the computer, they hijacked it, they tried to sell everyone out in the 80s with this tech, and now it's happening again. And all they're doing is the powers that be are just trying to replicate exactly the same system within, the fucking internet or whatever. Whereas what I got from what DeSantis was saying is when everyone wakes up, it's like all you have to do is buy a piece, because in that bit where he read from 2002, he was like, this will be divisible in umpteen ways, but it will only be a limited amount. So that means that let's just use Bitcoin's thing, that it's 21 million coins divided by 7 billion people, that can be done. And then
We lost him. And then
everyone's in there. It doesn't matter what the value of that in there, what you can do, digital information.
you
And
cut
then my
out.
internet dropped out.
Ben, you're going to have to say
Well,
that. but-
essentially,
and then everyone.
Well, once everyone has a tiny piece, you can attach anything that you have to it.
Right.
Which creates your value, which then gives power, which is energy, yada, 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 yada.
It is your.
It's not about the. Yes.
It is your space, your private space that they cannot tax, they cannot corrupt. If you have a private key on that blockchain.
Okay. I'm going to throw this out there.
And you
because
can power
something
it with
that Billy-
any equity you can attach.
I want to throw this out there because this is something that has been playing in my head for the last day or two. Because we've talked about time loops. And we've talked about technology loops, and DeSantis brings that up. And we've talked about even our continuous, it seems like at least once a year we have a conversation that ends up regarding with fringe being brought up into the conversation.
Every conversation brings fringe.
Yeah, okay, that's true. There's every conversation we end up going to fringe. In this whole thing of time loops, what if what we're experiencing, because we've talked about this, where there's this sensation of like being drawn back into 2013 almost. Certain shit that was happening in 2013 is now 2015 is now. All of these things keep going around. Was the blockchain a piece that was dropped in to correct this? In the form of, and I have no words. I'm trying to explain this very.
Was the blockchain dropped in as something to retether yourself to because something had become sort of
not to retether yourself to, but
has
maybe
the blockchain
to
always been there.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, but now we're talking. Okay,
you just started paying attention to it, so it's coming to life in this way that it wasn't before because it didn't have consciousness focused on it. Yeah.
Okay, exactly. So we've talked about the difference between the digital and the analog, and we've talked about the concept of a digital overlay on this planet, this reality, this realm. If I'm going to use Randy's words, this realm.
It is a realm.
There's a digital. What I've seen personally as a digital overlay of control structure. Is the blockchain the undercurrent, as you were saying, in that the signal,
the other stuff rides on,
that it's riding on? And DeSantis brought up the backdoor hacks, and
almost like light rail, like it's almost like light rail or something like that, right? Like that kind of like a blockchain, like in some way, right? That like things can sort of ride on.
Well, think about, and I'm going to go back to Chris, Gio, and Cherie, and they were talking about this one, the video that I watched yesterday. They were talking about the AI that runs the construct, the realm, and that there was a virus in it, and therefore it went off the rails, quite literally. Is the blockchain the actual undercurrent that pins it all together? So the AI goes off the rails for however, whether it's been infected, it got infected, it was done deliberately, it was accidentally, regardless, doesn't fucking matter. Everything starts getting completely fucked up. And it becomes, you start to pay attention, like you said, paying attention to that white noise, like the white noise that plays in the background.
Right.
And then the attention brings it up. And I have this thing in my head saying that this blockchain could very well be the underpinnings, the signal carrier, if you will. And that now we're seeing it, and it is what the digital overlay has been pinned to, but it's not, it's analog, if you will. It's not the digital per se, it is what is there.
What if like focus creates energy, right? So what Emily was saying,
and sorry, Ben, and said, like the original organizing principle. Exactly. If it was the original organizing principle that was there, and then the corruption happens, which then
that's been my point.
Cuts out the white noise. Wasn't that what you said, Randy? The analog has got the white noise there. It's there, but the digital comes in and it takes away the white noise, which connects as a fluid motion.
Well, my whole thing has been that the blockchain is a chance for
earlier
us to
on
understand reality. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, what Em was saying earlier on in the show was like, have the pyramids always been there, or are they coming through? Are they, you've got stuff coming up in Antarctica, and I've always wondered, like, well, what here? But see, where focus goes, energy created, right? So the more focus something has, the more energy it gains. HK sees the same stuff, right, Jeff? It's like you give a thought too much form, it can take on, and then you feed it, right? Mm-hmm. So I've always wondered whether these fucking megalithic structures and stuff were signposts.
Yes.
Yeah.
E.g., as we wake up, we start seeing them. Like we saw them as, oh, look, these magnificent structures. And then we were like, through an age, and then we're like, oh, what are these magnificent structures for? Da, 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 da. We're all focusing now on the screen, okay? What if, it's kind of a fucking multilateral kind of idea, but it's like, what if blockchain is literally being created, whether it was by a person, you know, a human being or whatever, still has come through consciousness to be created, and everyone's focus is on digital. So what if, once again, and I'm just putting this out there hypothetically, but what if blockchain is an offering? And from what DeSantis and the way he describes it, it's like this could be a way out of that system in a way that you don't actually have to trust anymore, because it's just there and happening. It's going through its pulse. So because everyone's focusing on digital now, it's like, okay, well, you can't do what I'm trying to do and build the farm and get everyone to come to the farm to learn the stuff. You've got to give them the first stepping stone, and everyone's focused, and the new millennials and all that are so into music and the smartphones and stuff like that, that this stuff here makes more sense to them than the older generation. So it's the next offering. And once again, it's like we can look at it as like, okay.
Like the blockchain is like a megalithic structure that exists. Like,
Okay, so
I see what you're saying. It's a megalithic
basically,
structure.
It's coming through.
Coming through. I get, yeah. Well, I like, and that even goes to how you perceive the pyramids. Like for Chris and Cherie, like they needed to go to Egypt to go to the pyramids. For me to go to the pyramids, all I have to do is close my eyes, right? To me, it's something that exists in my consciousness. I don't need, like, I'm sure it would be amazing to go to the physical place, but literally I can go to a warehouse in downtown LA and like get in my groove and close my eyes. And I can basically, what they're describing to me is exactly what I see when I close my eyes. So they're there and they're telling me what it was like. And so, and sort of same with the blockchain. You can sort of use it as a way to understand reality, or you can actually use it for this thing that it's being used for. But it's there. It's there for sort of people's consciousness to focus on and to do what they will with.
see, binary is a means to an end. It's an intermediate. It's an intermediary information flow. Whatever goes into it in the form of intelligence outputs at some point into an analog form somewhere. That would be the whole point of it. Information itself is an analog output, whether it's a piece of paper
and it's
or
marketing.
Recording. We don't live in digital.
No.
The goal of AI would be to get us into digital, which means we're in an intermediary space and no longer capable of creating, I might add.
Right.
So while we argue about organic and analog, the truth of the matter is that the last place you want to be in consciousness is in digital space.
Yep.
Digital space
Yep.
is for objects.
Okay, but is this the reason why technology is failing right now?
Yes.
Because
It's an intermediary, and it
it
will
is an
fail.
intermediary, and we are moving farther and farther away. And technology is rapidly failing at an unbelievable pace at the moment.
And one of the things that DeSantis stresses, and it came through to me as the sort of the original nation sort of thing, which is 100 generations foresight. And what he sort of went into is like, but they didn't see this, and they didn't see this. It's like he stated that he was talking to, who was it, the NSA, no, they was talking to the finance boards, and they were just sort of keeping tabs.
The FCC?
SEC.
Yeah.
SEC.
So he said he'd been
SEC.
speaking with them, and they were interested, but they were just sort of keeping tabs. So he wasn't surprised about all this recent information about such and such doing this fucking big deal and these guys fucking pushing this here, because
It froze.
And we lost because
been
This is technologies for Ben. Your
Because
technology.
Ben's technology is fucking
to
failing.
go, hey, blah 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 blah. Well, one,
Ben, your technology failed. We
but
missed a
that's
lot of
what
what
like.
you said.
I know.
From the
The
standpoint of
sun's the sun's coming up.
from the standpoint of adoption by mainstream institutions into blockchain, this right now for them is just the latest way to run arbitrage and be able to do derivatives. They care
yeah.
not at all about the structure of it. Their downfall is the fact that they don't have this conversation.
Nope.
Their consciousness
They don't
is
get it.
restricted. Their consciousness is restricted to a bottom line mentality. That's rooted in an old world that is sinking.
And that's
As your sun is rising, that civilization is sinking
Yeah.
off the southern bow of whatever sits below or beyond Antarctica. And they can't see the dinosaur that they've become. And they don't recognize the metaphor. They worship the metaphor. They're like Moses' people in the desert worshiping the golden calf while he's on the mountain getting the tablets. That sort of thing.
Yep. And that's
Exactly.
I mean, DeSantis brought that up.
Exactly.
He talked about that levels and how you have to move up and through the levels and your comprehension and how you comprehend this. And he said that to Vortex. He was like, like you see it as this, and you're the host of the show, and then you've got the viewers down here,
Well, and that's the
not
thing
invested yet at all, and they all have to move up. And those bankers types, those Wall Street, etc. They're so far down in their comprehension that they cannot even comprehend beyond the dollar sign. To them, there's nothing beyond that.
Yeah, they've
and that's sort of what I was.
Go ahead, please.
Well, that's sort of what I was getting at. Is like they've built all this tech and they've tuned it however the fuck they've tuned it, and then we go through a minimum that they haven't been through before, and it just fucks it all out because it's not tuned. Right? That's the thing. It just makes it irrelevant, which is why they have to fucking update everything all the time and put fucking towers everywhere all the time because natural magnetic frequencies change, and they've got to fucking alter everything around that to the point where they've chucked things in the atmosphere just so that they can try and get a clear signal because when the sun comes up, my fucking internet falls out. So they haven't caught up, and that's what that's okay. What I thought he was saying was like
he's doing
he's sitting there going, "I'm
signals."
We're bouncing, frequency bouncing. But that was what he's saying.
3 o'clock in the morning for Ben. That way he can do a whole show in the dark, so he'll have internet.
Once I'm finished with Telstra after this week, believe you me.
Hey guys, I have to go to work, so I'm going to have to bow out. But thank you. I always love chatting with you all.
I am.
And I enjoy doing this, and I'll see you guys next time.
Okay.
Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow because I want to talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Hit me up. Okay. Bye, guys. Thank
See
you.
ya.
So yeah, and yeah, I mean that's one of the things I see screwing things up is like, we don't take into consider everything we talk about is the other external forces at play here. If a 400 minimum cycle exists and the fucking sun's not powering the atmosphere that they were using to bounce shit off, it's like, there's all those sorts of things, and they're trying to update their technology with 5G real quick. And
okay, and the thing about the 5G,
might not.
this is a conversation that Ann and I had, that these big articles are released that 5G, they're having to cut down trees. Because the sap in the trees, i.e. the liquid, the lifeblood of the tree, is interfering with the signals. They can't, okay, what are you going to do with all the fucking humans? Okay, we're filled with their own bloody sap.
Well, you want to know the funny thing is here
we'd love to know the
in
funny thing.
Australia, there's a couple of the eucalyptuses that actually absorb. Is that they're having so much trouble? It's like the internet falls out. Is the trees are actually completely fucking with them
Now
big time.
you have your argument about organic. Now we get
Exactly
to
where
the
I'm going
point of
with
it.
this, Randy.
Now we
Exactly.
find out that not only is 5G going to fail, even as it's already failing as they're rolling it out, because it's such short distance. They have to keep putting transponders, and they've got more barriers because there's billions of trees out there. They're going to have a field day trying to put it in my neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood with 60-year-old trees around me, and they ain't cutting them down.
Mhm.
How are you going to get it through the California redwoods? Yeah, there's Ben showing you his tree collection.
See, this is what I mean by the level of desperation that they have to install higher levels of toxic technology, because 5G is the whipped cream and cherry on top of what they gave us with smart meters and EMF and all these other gross, negligent, negative technologies that they've installed, from cell phones to
Microwaves
and Glen Towers. I mean, all of it.
So
see,
Catherine Ross, wait. So Catherine Austin Fitz is working with that EMF warrior dude, and evidently 5G doesn't come through sheetrock walls. It comes through the glass windows. And so they all bought clear from the hardware UV film. And that's all you have to do to stop it if you're in that type of situation.
Okay, so let's go back here and say, let's say they've known this was coming, etc. All these fucking office buildings now that are all solid glass. All these fucking houses now that are these big designer houses that are fucking nothing but fucking glass walls.
Corrugated iron, the roofing that they use in 90% of the southern hemisphere. I'm not sure about the northern hemisphere.
No.
But I found this out, like it fucks Wi-Fi, it fucks Bluetooth, it fucks all those sorts of things. And we did tests on different devices and putting using like clear light or plastic corrugation over phones and speakers.
Or phones and
stuff
speakers.
using Wi-Fi, and it would go through, and then you put corrugation over it and nothing.
Well, the sine wave, what Randy was talking about. The sine wave
Thing.
is right there. That's
So like they've kind
metal.
of is that why they moved into smart meters, because they had to get in under the roof? You know, like this is the whole thing, is like
Well, I'm in the process of putting.
They haven't thought about
smart meter. You can you can cage a smart meter.
Yeah, you can, and then there's this biogeometry guy who's got these sigils that you can just get a marker and fucking draw it on.
Nice.
And
we'll do graffiti on smart meters.
It'll do the same thing. So this is what I mean. Is like we've now got to the point where this dude's done all these tests throughout Eastern Europe, and he's like, they've changed the entire emotion of townships, like depression deleted, all this sort of stuff, just with these sigils placed in the right space. So we're now down to being able to draw in our walls literally with markers and paint over them, you know? And it's like, what, motherfucker? 5G this.
Planet G Etch-a-Sketch.
I'm thinking windows with clear nail polish. Just take clear nail polish and draw all the sigils all over your windows.
And here we are replaying attack and changing our reality.
Exactly.
Replay, yeah.
Yeah, going back to old tech, literally magic markers.
But that's what I'm getting at. It's not even like, that's the funny thing, right? Is we call it old tech, but it still goes back to that whole thing. It's like, was the wheel actually an evolution? And I have this argument with people all the time. So yeah, it is when you're in land and all the rest of it. But if we were, you know,
seafarers,
coastal sometimes, not other times, and we were seafarers, and we just used to be like, boom, 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 no problems, didn't have to take anything out of the way. We used to ride straight up the riverways. It's like we've actually lost a real important skill. it's so funny. And then you take that again, and it's like, well, if we used to pour stones with certain metals and crystals in it, and all you have to do is create this frequency, and that rock will just float because you've equaled out its thing, and you can just push it into place. You can build gigantic structures. So it's really hilarious.
I want to go back to what Jeff was talking about with his Argonite, right? And the idea of like putting the sigil in the Argonite. I've been collecting, I don't know if you guys can see, these are raw calcite crystals from Gozo. So like I said, when we have the Unfuckers gathering sometime in October this year, we're going to make a shit ton of plasterite. And we're going to put all these natural homeopathic crystals to Gozo in the plasterite. We're probably going to add a couple of sigils. And then we're going to go around the entire island. And at the top of every one of these flat-topped hills, plant a piece and put them all the way around the island and run an experiment. And say, like we said, and homeopathic, right?
Danny. Even more homeopathic, though, would be to make a whole load of stickers and go around sticking them on everything. A smaller dose, if you like.
Exactly.
That's your antenna array right there.
Your antenna array.
Yeah.
Well, that's your energetic Faraday.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
It's both, actually.
Yeah.
And then it could be both, and where you pay your attention to.
Exactly. But that's all these things that we're talking about, all these different components have all been used. Like, bentonite clays that we use in health, they were part of polymers. The diatomaceous earth, they were also part of the polymers, and what they do to, those things there negatively ionize air. So you've got all these different components that are there, and once again, it's the same with the blockchain. Is it a ruse, or is it an answer? And as DeSante says, it's like it depends on your reality. Like, I think that the biggest marketing thing is of course everyone has, well, not so much has faith, but everyone comprehends money, even if it's in their own way. So even with the projects that we've been trying to do with, like, trying to teach people alternative farming methods and stuff like that, the biggest thing is any company, any entrepreneur, they all want to see P&Ls. So we've had to work ways that we can create each one of these little things to be economic as well, because that's the belief structure.
And see, that's the reductionism that goes on when you're dealing with economic entities. You actually can reverse the equation.
That's the part, eh?
The real value is that those people have no value unless you produce something. Yep. You see, the parasite got so used to the host it forgot, oh shit, if this thing dies, I'm fucked.
I done been fucked. Exactly. And
look at Elon Musk. He is so confused about robotizing his manufacturing system that he lost his shit. I mean, he had to rehire humans because humans create and have value.
And we're watching here, like Gozo is like years behind everywhere else, right? For example, we went in at a desperation one night about 2 months ago. It was a late on Monday night. All the restaurants were closed. The only place that we knew of that was going to be open was fucking McDonald's. And you go, it was actually my birthday of all things. It was my birthday dinner, ended up being McDonald's that night. We go into McDonald's. They've got 2 cash desks, like they're right at the front. And all of these big poles are all these automated menus where you go up and you have to punch in your own fucking order. And I'm sitting there, and it's not intuitive. It's fucked up the way they've got the whole menu thing set up. And you're sitting there going, I want 3, like, how can I, what the, and you have to go back and delete your order and go back for it. I finally looked up, so I was like, fuck this. And I walked up to the counter and I said, I'm going to give you my order. And the lady was like, oh yes, you can do that. I'm like, meanwhile, how many people did they fire or lay off, et cetera, to put in this technology, which is fucking useless, and everyone was getting so mad at the technology they were going up to the front counter anyways. So it was like ridiculous. We're watching the whole thing of like trying to get rid of the people, but exactly, if you get rid of the people, there's no value left. Like that is what creates it, and the parasite is literally killing its own host. And we're seeing it play out across broad spectrum, almost everywhere you can look right now. That is literally playing out right now.
Yep.
Unless the parasite isn't real to begin with.
Well, that's like,
and Danny, that brings us to the proliferation of kind of exit strategies that are coming out at the moment. Because everybody knows we're at the end of the line. Doesn't matter if they've ever watched a program like this or not. And that's the thing that we've never really talked about. What's next? We've talked about the things that we don't, all the stories that we don't believe and we won't have, and we're not going down any feckin' manholes. We're sure about that. But we've never really talked about, what's next? What can we create? What do we want? What do we want to create?
I would rephrase that. I don't know that we're at the end of the line. I have a knowing I'm going to be right back where I started from. So the end of a line means that.
Yeah, I think that let's. Everyone can feel that something is happening. Everyone can feel that something is happening right now, and whether it's. But again, I think the exit strategy thing is a really well said, Ann, because that's what a lot of people are coming across as. There's an exit strategy. How do we get out of this construct? How do we get off this planet? Whether it's a la Cobra and you go down a fucking manhole into some disgusting, whatever. Whether it's, right? So there seems to be a real play out of the narratives of an exit strategy. Seems to be a major narrative right now. And I think that is this tangible point. Are we really trying to exit? Is that it, or are we actually trying to create what we want?
Well, that's kind of the whole thing, isn't it? It's like, because depending on how you look at it, just what DeSantis had to say is kind of more poignant now than ever, because it's kind of that whole, like, who am I? Like, or what am I? Or all that kind of stuff, because it's about defining your reality.
Always becoming.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at all these new solutions on offer at the moment. Like, they're doing these huge warehouses where they're offer. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, they're people's enterprises, but you sort of look at them. It's like one of the big things at the moment is like, we need to feed everybody. So they're creating these warehouses called aeroponics, right? And it's just like they're all in fake light. It's like they atomize the water, so the amount of water's less, and they produce heaps of food. But I'm like, where's the sun and the soil? It doesn't solve fucking anything.
You see where they always take you to the zero-sum game again? Where they tell you there's a limitation, we're going to work within the limit. What do you do on the day when you find out that this world is bigger than anything we've ever imagined, when land is so unlimited and resources that have never been touched or seen by humans before is found out?
Well, see, the other side of that as well, Randy, is even with what we have on offer here,
it's unlimited.
It's still.
No, it is all unlimited.
It's like, it's just abundant, and scarcity is the model that's kind of constantly pushed. But there's
scarcity is the model
is only the scarcity is only within a certain reality. That's
right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
In economics, all economics is debt-based economics.
Exactly.
And all living economics, if you will, is based on scarcity in the exact same way. So the complete opposites.
Well, that's exactly
reality.
right. And that goes back to the basis of, as far as I'm concerned, of all of this second lot of fuckery that's going on, which is where they codified nature and tried to create an international law based on it. So it's mimicry, and that's sort of what we were talking about. It is mimicry, and they seem to wait for something to happen. And then they subvert it. It's like, you know, our philosophers used to be bards. They were bards. They were poets, right?
Yeah.
And now they own the music industry.
Yeah.
But when they codified Codex Alimentarius, all of a sudden the earth went, well, we'll just throw in a few more things they don't know about yet, and on we go. Because human consciousness trumps... Oops, sorry, didn't mean to bring that up.
Oh!
Human
Randy
consciousness...
Moggins, 2 minutes in the naughty corner.
Human consciousness is primary. It's primary to everything. And if we just keep reminding ourselves, we don't need an exit strategy. We need a goddamn entrance strategy. Isn't it time we asserted ourselves into this game? Come on, people. I'm not running from this. I came here for this war.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yep.
No, Randy, sorry, I should clarify. I should have said an end strategy, I suppose.
No, I understand. And I'm just sort of twisting what you said there to make a rhetorical comment. But I get the thought.
Yeah.
Well, I had a really interesting conversation this week because one of the comments that gets thrown around social media amongst all the so-called awake, aware people, if you will, is nothing is changing. People aren't waking up. We need people to wake up. We can't get them to wake up, etc. And I've been saying for ages, people are waking up, and we're watching it. We're watching it unfold. People are, and they come at their levels, and they come at their own speed. But we're watching people start to question, and all of these things. I had a conversation this week with my semi-adopted son, who's 18, who lives here in Malta, and he was listening. He was sitting. We're all outside having a smoke, and Nick and I are having one of our usual conversations, and he's sitting there next to us, just listening in. And he finally looks at me and goes, "Okay, I have to ask you a question." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, hit me." He goes, "Is the world coming to an end?" And I was like, "What? Okay, back up, dude. Like, okay, so where are you getting this from?" And he says, "I am like literally all my friends, all they talk about right now is the fact of everything is fucked, but nothing feels real anymore." He says, they're all like, this is like a video game, and it's like reality isn't real anymore, and it's so outrageous that nothing makes sense. And he said, like, so we got into the whole conversation, and he knows, he's sat and listened to me talk for fucking years, so he's pretty aware of all this kind of shit that we talk about. And he said, even his most, like, friends of him, he's got a couple of roommates, and they all sit and they talk Mandela effects type stuff, and they talk about the Matrix, and he says to me, like, we're watching the Matrix glitch out now daily. Him and his roommates are like, "Oh, did you just see that? What the fuck? That's like the Matrix just totally fucking glitching." And he says, but now it's the point where his friends, who he says are completely fucking asleep. They don't know their assholes from their elbows. They know jack shit about anything. And they turn around, and he said one of them walked up to him last week and was just like, "Dude, I'm beginning to think that this isn't real anymore. That nothing in this world is real anymore, and that it's just a gigantic video game."
And now, that's where they want you.
But this is the thing. But these are a bunch of 18-year-olds who are looking around. These are kids who want to just play video games all day. They're not politically savvy, nothing. And they're looking around the world right now and going, what the actual fuck is going on?
And that's what I was getting at about the fucking the powers that be playing catch up. These young crew are so fucking smart and onto it. They just get to that age and they just go, that ain't right. This don't seem real. And the powers that be have not created the next offering. And these guys there's nothing out there that resonates because they just look at it and they're going, what the fuck are you doing? That's not what this shit's about. And they already know. And I was mistaking it for complacency and fucking like this whole millennial da-da-da-da-da. And I got talking and I was like, ooh, bad judgment, Ben. I was like, there is nothing fucking on offer. There's nothing that makes sense to them that's on offer.
They're not keeping
nothing
up.
on offer for them.
Yeah, and these kids will not engage with stuff that isn't real. I mean, they have very, very tuned BS meters or whatever you call them. And I'd say quite a lot of people in here would have been part of the same wave. Like Randy, you would have, people who came in here knowing that you've never fit in from the very beginning. You've had this knowing that it's all wrong, and it's you're here to put a fly into a spanner in the works.
Yeah, and they're being confused right now with being like, we're going to take away all your definitions so that you can't fucking call each other anything, but we're not going to tell you who or what you are, and therefore your defining space is becoming more and more limited because if you say something you might offend somebody regardless of whether it's about you or not. So they're literally having everything, including their words, now taken away. And very few adults are sitting there talking about that. They're just saying, they're out of hand and they're this, that, and the other, and they're fucking pharmaceutically deficient and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And yet I sort of look at it and it's like they're all going, well, the ones in this area, and we're talking tourists from fucking America, well, Ben, is the farm ready yet? Can we come out and just cut some grass or, hang out with the chickens? Yeah. And it's like, oh, not quite, because I haven't got my mowing down timed yet, but soon, but they're chomping because they want something real. And there's nothing real on offer. And the reason the computer games and the tech is so attractive, I guess,
Absorbing?
is it doesn't fucking talk back for starters, and it does what it's fucking told, and they understand how to tell it what to fucking do.
Yeah, well, that's a control mechanism for them. It allows them to, if you only look at the game as a simulation for training purposes, that's useful.
Well,
but
they're going through ultimate creation in their reality, right?
Yeah, and then they're coming back into a world where they have no power at all.
Yeah.
Because perceptually they don't understand. You always have two motions of everything that are moving. It's sine, cosine. And in that, there's a false positive going on. So you have a generation now where we have the pronoun war because we don't know if it's he, she, they, or it.
Or an Apache attack helicopter.
But at the same time, you have a generation that's also said, you know what? I'm not buying into this gender bullshit anymore. Now, somewhere in there's a truth. But the truth isn't in the politics of the gender. The truth is in the expression of the soul that lives inside the living being. And people lose the argument because they get conflicted by the politics of being co-opted, and then you wind up with a false narrative again, when the real narrative was, I'm who I say I am. I assert my beingness.
Yeah, and everyone uses their experience to justify their being, as opposed to them being, which is why they had experience.
Yep, I agree. They've got nothing on offer, and I look at it in my own son, who's now 27. He turns 27 next month, and I look at it in my son, my adopted kind of son, who's 18, and I watch them flounder because they're being pushed to do something, right? Society pushes them. You got to go get a job. You go get an education. You got to go do this. You got to do this. You got to do this, because they're supposed to want what we were told we were supposed to want, which was the house with the white picket fence and the 2.3 children and whatever, and the dog and the cat and the budgie. And they don't fit into that. And they have no way of even attaining it, even if they wanted to. Financially, we look at what's going on. There's no jobs. There's no, so they go to university to get some degree that they may never, ever be able to use, and put themselves $100,000 in debt for flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, unless their job gets taken away by a robot. These kids don't, there is nothing on offer for them. I think that's the best terminology that I've heard so far. There's nothing on offer for them.
We are trying.
But the generation that grew up in the 90s, my kids they were given this promise of a technological era, and the concept that, and you know, for a while I was kind of stumbled by this. My kids are out, they're doing carpentry and construction and landscape work. They're back to working foundational skills that people have used for thousands of years. Why? Because that's where the value is. The value is not in the tech industry anymore.
Yep.
And they're taking away apprenticeships, and then making it fucking school based
skills,
which is hilarious.
And it comes back to that whole parasite killing its host thing, because this is what's happening. We're watching this across the board. We had a conversation here just about a week ago. So in Malta and Gozo, there's, like I said, they lag behind in certain thought processes, if you will. And there's this massive push that all the kids, you have to push your kids. They all must go to university. They all have to be IT guys. They have to be lawyers. They have to be doctors. They have to be something. So all of a sudden, you have a country like Malta that was built on this: carpenters, stonemasons, bricklayers or stone layers, farmers, people who were metal workers, etc. And now, you know what? All the young kids have left. And when you look out in the fields, most of the farmers out working in the fields are 60, 70, and 80 years old. And the young kids don't want to be farmers, because they've been taught, no, they need to be an IT guy. They need to be a doctor or a lawyer or a banker, etc.
They've been sold that.
They've been sold this.
Those are the analog skills.
And all the analog skills here are dying out. And I literally talking to someone, a friend of ours, a while ago, and I said, he was talking about when he was building a house, he got the guy who is the arch builder. And this man, his family, have done nothing but build arches for like 20 generations. And the guy was in his 80s. And he was the type of guy, because he lived nothing but arches, he could look at a blank wall, take a piece of chalk and go, "Ho!" and hand cut the fucking blocks without a measuring tool. And they would fit each one absolutely pristinely. And he's trying to teach his grandson. And his grandson's been forced into this work. Like, it's like, he's the younger son. So it's like, okay, you've got to go work with grandpa, and you have to learn the family business, because God knows we need someone to keep this alive. And he just doesn't care, because as far as he's concerned, he's like, well, no, I'm being told by my teachers that I need to study whatever useless fucking thing. And we've come to a place where the physical skills, the analog physical skills, if you will, are dying out. We see it in midwifery. When the medical machine took over midwifery all over North America and in England, it took away the skills of the midwives. And then when all of a sudden we saw studies come out saying, no, breech babies should be born naturally, not through a cesarean section. Oh, great. But now you have 2 generations of midwives who don't know how to birth a breech baby, because it was taken away from them. It went to technology. We're just going to, the baby's breech, send her to the hospital. She's going to have a cesarean section. Boom. The skills are being lost. And this is one of those things that I think I'm seeing some of the younger people now, like my kid who's 18 here, he wants to learn how to build longboards. He wants to learn how to build longboards, but he wants to learn how to bend the wood. He actually, and so he's sitting with Nick in the workshop, and Nick is teaching these teenage kids how to bend wood, how to shape it, how they have to mold it and laminate it together. And it's an old skill being used in a new way, but it's an old skill that they're bringing back. And they're all of a sudden now they're like, oh, this is so cool because it's real. It's an actual real thing, tangible. They can put their hands on and they can physically make this thing. And then you see the light. You see, like they're excited again and they want to do these things because there's something on offer.
It's an analog process. There's no digital interface necessary.
Yep. Oh, man.
All right.
Folks, I tell you.
That's the quietest anyone in this fucking room's been, I think. Oh, yeah.
Everyone take a deep breath. Well, I just looked at the clock just then, too. I just looked at the pause happened. It's 12:01. 2 hours we've been at this, which is so funny. See, it was just like everyone. See, just the pause. Just a little pause. I want to thank you guys. This has been fucking awesome. Every time, Randy, we have you and Emily and Jeff on the show, we never know where the conversation's going to go, and I always love that because I
got to talk to Ben today. How awesome is that? I love you, man.
It was a lovely change that internet because the last 2 times you've been on, your internet has been shockingly bad.
Yeah.
I was like, like I say, I got up at 5 this morning. I was like doing all my fucking dial tests and trying to work out because the internet's been fucked for 2 days. And I'm messaging my mates at fucking 5:15 this morning going, yeah, can I sneak up and sit on the veranda and use your internet?
At 5 o'clock in the morning, can I come to your house and use your internet? Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Oh,
all right.
Good chat.
Yeah, so I want to say a huge thanks to Randy and Emily, who's already had to leave, and Ann, and Jeff, and Ben, and of course, JC, who's in the background, keeping us all on the air. Sunday, Ann and I still have to do part 2 of the quintessentially whole natural first aid kit, but we haven't gotten there yet. We've been kind of distracted. We've been a lot distracted. So that is coming up at some point. That is coming up. So I don't know what show we're doing on Sunday because, again, I'm not organized. And it'll just happen as it happens.
So everyone go out and get your texters ready for when we start doing our sigil shows.
That's right. Everyone get some clear nail polish, a black magic marker.
See if we can change like the street art so they start putting it into their graffiti and stuff. It'd be hilarious, right?
Oh, that's an awesome idea.
The revolution won't be televised, but it'll be graffitied everywhere.
I like it. No, I like it. That's freaking awesome. I like it. I'm gonna try and remember all the shit that we covered. I will put the DeSantis stuff. Jeff, I'll put a link to your playlist because you've created that lovely DeSantis playlist, which was very helpful for me earlier today. So I'll just put the link to Jeff's playlist with all the DeSantis interviews, and everyone can just have at her and be prepared to have notepads. And it takes a long time to get through them because you're gonna have to stop and rewind and re-listen. And the link, someone, if you can help me, that link to the guy with the sigils. Fred, you put the link in there. Can you do me a favor? If you can, send me that link privately in a private message so I don't lose it because my messenger's fucked.
Got to try and interview that dude, the scientist dude.
Yeah, we got to get a hold of DeSantis and actually get him to sit down.
No, do the biogeometry dude first. And
then the DeSantis dude after that?
Well, yeah, because then that leads into your frequency and stuff, because that scientist dude will be able to be like, sigil this and sigil that and da-da-da-da, and then you've got, this dude is tuning his fucking computer with a piano.
Interesting.
Okay, well, darlings, that is it for us. If everyone wants to hang out, we always end up chatting more anyways. But yeah, we will be back Sunday night, most likely, given technology, give or take. As we say in Morocco, inshallah. We'll be back on Sunday night. And same bad time, same bad channel. And we'll talk to you guys later.
Okay.
Bye,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.